Hello everyone! Today we are going to be looking at the riots that went down in the city of Bristol. Just for a quick summary of Bristol, it is essentially the UK version of Portland. It has been a Labour stronghold since forever. It is absolutely brimmed with progressive people, and it is known for having a rather large Antifa cell, at least in our circles. As it was in Bristol's University of West England, where Jacob Rees-Mogg had his scuffle with Antifa about 2 or 3 years ago. And let's not forget, more recently, this was where the Edward Colston statue was torn down, so far the only statue to have been torn down by a mob in the UK. But as I've said in other videos, there appears to be more official means to take down all our historical statues. Anyway, on to Bristol. So on Sunday, the 21st of March, there was a Kill the Bill protest going on in Bristol. The idea of this march was to protest the new Police, Crime, Sentencing and Court Bill, which from what I can see from what I've read of the reports, the worst part is absolutely the part about protests, where they will set curfews on protests, set noise levels on protests, and generally have the power to shut down any protest that is quote-unquote annoying. So Bristol being the city that it is, full of Antifa cells and, let's face it, a lot of far-left people, this protest went about as well as expected. Incoming are clips of the day that happened sometime after the peaceful part of this protest was over. Let's have a look. Yes, while the police held a line with police dogs after the protest was supposed to be over, people started setting off fireworks, which one, really damages dogs and people's hearing, and seemed to be deliberately set off to maybe do some damage to the store, but also just cause general chaos. But things didn't improve. Yes, it's good to see that social distancing laws are still in place at these events. But these were standard scenes, and this was only throughout the day in Bristol on the 21st of March. And this is just scuffles with police, so as you can see they attacked and spray-painted a police van with the classic ACAB sign, meaning all cops are bastards. They were shouting "Kill the Bill," which obviously is supposed to refer to the Police, Crime, Sentencing and Court Bill that's going through, but it's also a double entendre, as in the UK it is quite common to refer to the police as the old bill. I mean, there's even a police drama that's been going on for some years in the UK called The Bill. So once again, this mostly peaceful protest has ended up becoming a bit of a clusterfuck, with chaos being seen everywhere, and the police again being attacked and having to defend themselves. And unfortunately things only got worse as the night went on. Yes, so in those clips you can see that tagging the van with ACAB wasn't enough. They had to break into it and set it on fire. There was also graffiti put onto police buildings, again saying ACAB and fuck the police. And then in the final clip, obviously, we saw the dreaded Antifa Black Bloc trying to break through police lines, although there wasn't very many of them for some reason. But naturally, this wasn't all the clips. I mean, they went mental in Bristol that evening. And it is obviously my personal opinion that there should never be a riot in a relatively peaceful country with a democracy. Now, criticisms of democracy aside, the idea is that your vote is your force. You shouldn't be trying to intimidate on the streets either the police or anyone else. Yet here appear to be far left activists doing exactly that, and I can't stand for it, and no one should stand for it. And yet, here are more clips of what they seem to have been allowed to do.
Move in. There are police vans, obviously you can see the and prevented them from getting out, from doing no doubt what they intended to do. And they had to retreat down the road. You can see the sign there, ain't no sunshine till this bill withers. This is a kill the bill protest against Priti Patel's new law that would give the police extra power to limit the right.
It was going to say right to protest, but it cut off. But yes, there are parts of this bill that I disagree with. Am I going to go out and smash up my town because I don't like this bill that is being passed by Parliament, or put forward to Parliament? No, because I'm not an idiot. Anyway, here are a few more clips. At least there was some comedy with that last one. And I do have to say, these scenes are very similar to the ones that I have seen in Portland and elsewhere in the US whenever there has been an Antifa riot. Windows smashed, cars on fire, people all dressed up in black, with rather distinct red and black flags being waved about. And I am currently reading Andy No's book on Antifa, Unmasked. I'd recommend it to everyone. He does mention in there that it is a common tactic of Antifa to basically have some people doing small-scale vandalism and hooliganism, such as breaking windows, trying to attack one or two cops, spray painting things, and this is all to try and incite the bigger protest that may or may not be intending to be peaceful, to incite them into violence, essentially, and again, that seems to be what has happened. I think you can comfortably call a protest a riot when the crowd start cheering around a burning police car, when the police have basically done nothing wrong here. And so naturally the political commentators of the UK had quite a lot of things to say, and once again they seem to be rather on partisan lines, because why wouldn't they be? So first we have the sensible take from Nigel Farage, who says, "In Bristol tonight we see what the soft-headed approach to the anti-police BLM leads to. Wake up everyone, this is not about racial justice, these people want all-out anarchy and street violence." Which, if Andy knows extensive research into Antifa is anything to go by, that is true, though he mentions BLM here. And left-wing activists in his Twitter replies were trying to point out that this wasn't a BLM event. So Callum from the Lotus Eaters on his Twitter account had some screenshots from his phone of Facebook groups that were encouraging their members to join the event. This included groups such as Extinction Rebellion, Momentum, who is Labour's basically communist wing, the Bristol People's Association, which from the sounds of it is another left-wing group, and finally, of course, the Black Lives Matter Bristol chapter, or Black Lives Bristol. And this is the longer post from them. Hashtag Kill the Bill, Sunday 21/3/21 at College Green from 2 PM onwards. Remember PPE and to keep to social distancing. Many of you may have heard of the Police Crime Sentencings and Courts Bill that is being rushed through Parliament by Priti Patel, hashtag Real Queen. This bill is a violation of our human rights, exactly which ones they do not say, but as I say, the only thing I had a problem with really was the part on protesting, where the Priti Patel can basically shut a protest down for seemingly whatever reason she wants, which is obviously wrong. From student rights, Black Lives Matter to NHS unions to queer issues, we are all affected by this bill. Exactly what part, I have absolutely no idea. We must come together to protest against it and not let the state stop us. This protest has no organiser, this is not our event. So obviously, while this wasn't officially a Black Lives Matter event, as you can see, every left-wing cause under the sun was saying go to it and protest, which would have included Antifa, and as Andy No's book keeps pointing out, BLM and Antifa are pretty much parallels. One just focuses on racial justice, apparently, and the other focuses on ending capitalism and having an anarchist state. So now we'll get into a Times report on these events, which mentioned that more than 20 officers were hurt in the night of destruction in Bristol. And as I keep saying, I can't see what the cops were doing wrong to warrant being hurt in any way. And annoyingly, it looks like quite a lot of people are going to get away with it, because the article starts off with, participants in the Kill the Bill event said that the lack of a single organiser meant that it was vulnerable to being hijacked by a violent minority. Groups that encouraged their followers to attend the protest included Extinction Rebellion, All Black Lives Bristol, and Socialist Workers' Party Bristol. Of course the Socialist Workers were there. Another, No Fixed Abode Anti-Fascist, told people not to share footage of protesters unless they were in masks. Classic Antifa tactic. Martin Rees, the mayor of Bristol, said that the riot had nothing to do with the real everyday struggles that people in the city face after 12 months of the pandemic. He said that it had been fueled by those who go around looking for the latest demo. Avon and Somerset Police issued an appeal for people not to attend, but Andy Marsh, the chief constable, said there was no prior intelligence of disorder planned on this scale. No, because Antifa are very good at hiding their intentions. Again, I'm going to reference Andy No's book, Unmasked. Apparently, Antifa, to get into Antifa, you have to have a 6-month integration period, and then you are voted on whether you are allowed in. And throughout this period, you are given information on apps that you should download that are end-to-end encrypted, and are therefore very good at hiding what is being sent and who is sending them. Which personally I think is a fine thing to exist, but I can see why it makes it difficult for the police to get intelligence on Antifa. So the article then covers how the protest started quite peacefully, which is fine, and then gets into the real action. Man in the black bandana. The crowd were listening to uplifting speeches and poetry performance when a man wearing a mask made from a black bandana urged people to march to the police headquarters at Bridewell Street. Billy recalled, the guy that they were interviewing, the guy popped up from the back of the crowd and shouted, "The police can't hear you from here. You know where they can hear you? Yep, the police station. Let's go." In that split second, one guy walked to the police station and a bunch of people followed. Like sheep. Like sheep. You are individuals. Think for yourself, you NPCs. Then violence breaks out. By 6 p.m, a section of the protesters who had been drinking alcohol were hurling bottles and cans at the officers. Adaya Norris Witt, 20, a fine art student, of course she's a fine art student, said they were throwing bottles at about 6 p.m, and an hour and a half later we saw someone set the police van on fire, and we were all screaming for them to stop. This was not the message we wanted to be conveyed. Well, unlucky. It did get hijacked, and it was never not going to be hijacked. These are always Antifa events. If you've got an event called Kill the Bill, you can bet that you're going to get violent people there. For the next 4 hours, there was a steady ratcheting up of tensions as rioters climbed onto the station and sprayed anti-police slurs, broke the station windows, threw projectiles at lines of riot police, and eventually set fire to the vehicles. Zunakai 21, a law student at Bristol University, said, "I think people threw a box of fireworks inside the van, and it exploded. There was a lot of smoke. The police car was on fire afterwards." Yes, obviously this was a mostly peaceful protest with 20 police officers being injured. Honestly, I think we need better tactics for dealing with riots. Things like this should never be happening. By 9 p.m, agitators were throwing anything they could find at police officers, including pieces of scaffolding. In total, 21 officers were injured in what police describe as the worst case of violent disorder in the city for decades. Protesters stamped on one policeman, puncturing his lung and fracturing another officer's arm. Jesus Christ. So the police reaction. It wasn't a peaceful protest that suddenly erupted into a riot, Billy said. There were various things that happened, but there was no real retaliation from the police. The restraint showed by officers during the standoff was captured when 2 women urinated at the feet of riot police. Why are they acting like goddamn monkeys? The women were cheered on by the crowd as officers continued to hold their position to protect the station from being ransacked. Just push them over. Andy Roebuck, the chairman of Avon and Somerset Police Federation, said officers said they felt like they were going to be killed. Yes, of course they did. Everything's on fire, windows are being smashed up, and shit's being thrown at them. I too would probably be fearing for my life, and they should absolutely not be allowed to be in a position to feel like that. They should have the authority to defend themselves, using things such as tear gas and water cannons, because guess what? It seems to work. So speaking of the police's opinion on this, Andy Marsh, Chief Constable of Avon and Somerset Police, had an interview with BBC, and I think he was a very sensible man. Let's have a watch.
The protest was about the new powers under the Police and Crime Bill that would severely restrict the ability of people to protest. Under that legislation, there would be effectively scope for almost every demonstration to be stopped.
And the BBC interviewer isn't actually lying there. As I said, the words used within the bill say that there should be powers to allow police and the Home Secretary to stop protests if they are causing an annoyance, which, under the definition of protest, means every protest. Protests are meant to be annoying, otherwise there's no point in them.
What's your view on policing under that new law?
So the bill is a matter for politicians to debate in Houses of Parliament, and I don't want to get involved in that debate.
Well, it is the police's job to enforce the law, not debate the law, so I can completely understand his reply there. I just wish he said, yes, obviously it's going to infringe on the civil liberty of protest.
So last night, though, let's be clear, when that protest turned to violence outside the Bridewell police station, I don't believe that was a protest against the bill. That was an opportunity for criminals to actually become violent towards the police. It was an anti-police disorder.
I don't know why he didn't say riot, but he is right. This was an opportunity for Antifa to take up on, which again he doesn't name, but given Antifa is a group that quite likes turning up at people's homes that they do not like, and generally putting them in danger, I can understand why he didn't want to name them outright on television, though I think he should have. But I will just finish off this clip for now.
Andre, I'm not asking for a political view, but just your thoughts on entering potentially a new period where there will be much tougher restrictions against demonstrations, and what that might mean for policing.
So it's probably more difficult now to police protest than it's ever been. I say there's two reasons behind that. One is that protest is unlawful, technically under the COVID restrictions, which places us in a difficult position to make sense of that. But the second reason that it's difficult is that everyone's got a view. Is the policing too firm? Is it too lenient? And actually what we have is highly trained, professionally accredited, dedicated people that actually undertake that policing protest for us.
And he does underline a rather salient point, I think. Yes, protests are currently unlawful under the current restrictions with lockdown, and yet they never seem to be enforced, which, as he points out, is a difficulty, because also then after that, as he says, everyone has a view. Some people think they're being too lenient on these people. Well, you're listening to a person who thinks that right now. But then there are other people who think any police presence at all is a front to violence. So I think we should have a look at some of the people who think this. So first we have the UK's Communist-in-Chief Aaron Bastani. And his opinion on the riots were, if you remove people's lawful right to protest, you can see why this would be a response. Well, why did it take a year for this to be the response? We've had COVID for a year, which has removed people's lawful right to protest, so bullshit. Government and police forces need to think carefully about the resources they are willing to waste for Priti Patel to chase a few front pages. I don't think she's trying to chase a few front pages, though I think that will obviously be a reaction to her actually doing something about the violence and statue toppling we have seen in the UK recently. And also, let's not forget Extinction Rebellion's escapades around the world as well. And as I've always said, I think their form of protesting went way too far. As I say, I understand that protests need to be annoying, but when you have 3 days straight of shutting down London and forcing cancer patients to walk across London to get their treatment, at that point I will tell you to piss off. I understand you think the planet is ending in 10 years, but that is no reason to put London into a standstill and increase carbon emissions for that week. So next up, we have the Deputy Communist-in-Chief Ash Sarkar. Her tweet was a bit more interesting. She says, if the government wants people to protest peacefully, then perhaps they shouldn't push through measures which would criminalise peaceful protest. Well, they did that a year ago, Ash, and it's only taken till now, and they are protesting a completely different bill. The left can and must debate strategy. What are the ways to build outwards to organise effectively and defeat a bill that threatens our fundamental democratic rights? Again, she's not entirely wrong. It does go way too far with restricting protests. The rest of it's fine, though. But any moral condemnation of violence should start with the government. Okay. This is a government which has sought to erode, attack and undermine the means that would hold it accountable. It has sought to put agents out of the state above the law, CHIS, the Overseas Operations Bill, while cracking down on dissent. I mean, this is just Ash being full of non-sequiturs within 3 tweets, which is, pretty impressive, to be fair. I mean, at first she mentions that the government's cracked down on the right to protest, which, as I mentioned before, it did a year ago, but no one seemed to care because of COVID. And then she says we need to debate strategy, saying, we need to be effective in growing our group, essentially, and making us seem more welcoming. And then she just has a massive go at the government. She just hops from one point to another with no through line. It's all very odd. But she is a communist, so she doesn't really understand follow-through lines and logic. She also mentions that this is cracking down on dissent. This law would apply to everyone, Ash. That this would apply to people, Tories and your gammon types, who would be protesting for, let's say, the release of a certain TR who you are not allowed to say the name of on YouTube. That would be cracked down on as well, and that has already been cracked down on quite a lot. Though then again, that is usually when those protests start to get a bit out of hand and a bit violent, which is fine. But that wasn't the only thing she tweeted about this. There was another tweet from her saying, peaceful protest, but one side gets to wear body armour, deploy horses and dogs, and batten the living daylights out of the other side, to a tweet that has been deleted, but luckily the internet never forgets. So this tweet from Ash was in reply to this tweet from Labour MP Tony Perkins. He says, this looks to me entirely appropriate use of the baton. A good example of proportionate policing under extreme pressure. Well done. Clap, clap, clap. I think it's only fair that we judge for ourselves. Let's have a look at the clip. Yes, I actually agree with the Labour MP here, which is not words that come out my mouth often. According to Ash, the police line being pushed and attacked by a few Black Bloc members is a peaceful protest, and also according to her, that was them beating the living daylights out of them. I don't know what's wrong with Ash, but she never seems to see anything objectively. I mean, I say that, I know exactly what's wrong with Ash. She is a communist retard who is only capable of seeing events on partisan lines and making any excuse for her side while completely lying about the other to make them seem worse off. I am with Jordan Peterson on this when he says you should just disregard and leave behind ideology. Trust me, Ash, it will help you a lot. So unfortunately not everyone in the police is as sensible as Andy Marsh. We have this story from the Daily Mail. Police force chief says sorry after endorsing tweet blaming officers for Bristol riots. Rachel Swan, who leads Derbyshire Police, liked a tweet blaming officers. Guardian journalist Owen Jones, who had written the tweet criticising police tactics, and Miss Swan apologised after accidentally liking the post following the unrest. Right, so it was an accident, apparently. I'd like to point out that Rachel Swan is the police officer who was quote-unquote abused for her hairstyle, and she turned out to be chief constable not long after. I mean, with a hairstyle like that, it's no wonder you got bullied. The phrase yee-yee-ass haircut comes to mind. So anyway, back to the Mail article. Apparently Owen Jones wrote, if the government attempts to criminalise peaceful protests and police are set on women at a vigil, because apparently if a woman is a criminal, the left think they shouldn't be arrested or nothing bad should happen to them, the scenes tonight in Bristol become an inevitability. He continued, no justice, no peace isn't best understood as a threat, but as a statement of the glaringly obvious, which I would tend to agree with if I think there was any injustice going on. Miss Swan liked the tweet late on Sunday night, but later deleted the endorsement after being criticised online. She later condemned the violent scenes in Bristol. One Twitter user wrote, and yet you agree with the mob and that the violence was inevitable due to the Met's actions. Yes, that would appear to be the case. Saying it was an accident, such an easy get-out though, because it's neither provable nor disprovable. Though in my charitable state, I will say yes, maybe it was an accident. But what you are doing, even looking at Owen Jones's tweet like that and having your mouse or finger anywhere near the like button, is beyond me. Anyway, moving on. We have another Labour MP who was on Politics Live on Monday who was asked her opinion about the Bristol riots. Unfortunately, she is not as based as the man we saw tweeting before, so let's have a listen.
Nadia, do you want to take this opportunity now, having listened to the rest of the panel? Keir Starmer, your party leader, has also condemned the violence, along with the Mayor of Bristol. Do you want to condemn the violent scenes that we have just shown all our viewers from last night?
Of course, Jo, I don't want to see violence against anybody.
So you condemn it?
I wish everybody who's been hurt in this a speedy recovery.
How hard is it just to say yes? How hard is it just for a Labour MP on the far left of the party to say, yes, I condemn this violence? And then you can add on all violence to the end of it. That's what I do every time I have seen violence anywhere. The incident at the Capitol, where fire extinguishers were thrown at policemen and windows were smashed. I completely condemn that. That is something that should never be happening. It's that easy. What are you doing, Nadia?
I'm not going to, as I've already said, I'm not going to get into the business of condemning protesters until we know exactly what's happened.
Right, but
it's absolutely amazing, isn't it? She was shown similar clips to what I have shown you, of police cars being set on fire, fireworks going off. I wish I could show you the video of the women shitting on the street in front of officers. Obviously that wasn't on the BBC either. And apparently it's oh no, there's more nuance to it than no violence should have happened here. Which is amazing, because there has been absolutely no evidence that the police were in any way the aggressors. And yet Nadia, a far-left MP from the Labour Party, is trying to say, oh no, there's more nuance than that, you know, we don't know what happened. Jesus Christ.
But if you're condemning the violence, you do have to condemn some of those people that we can see quite clearly from the pictures were setting fire to police vans. Police officers have been injured and they were attacking the police. Responding actually to what Anita said as a Labour MP, do you want to just straightforwardly say that was wrong?
I can't believe after being shown clips of cars being set on fire, policemen being attacked and what have you, it still has to be spelt out to her that these things are bad. And we are giving you an open goal to say, yes, this was bad. And, well, is she going to take it or not? Well, what do you think?
I don't want to see violence being perpetrated against anybody, and I wish everybody who's been harmed a speedy recovery. But as I say, I'm not going to get into condemning protesters when we don't know what's happened yet. We need a full investigation into what's happened. On the side of protesters, as is happening, but also on the side of the police. That's just the function of a democratic society.
Disingenuous little shit. She's basically saying to us that she doesn't want to see violence of any kind. And that is not the same thing as condemning violence. I don't particularly want to see dogs defecating in the parks. I don't condemn it, though. And it's crazy that she thinks that there is any nuance in these clips. They outright attacked the police and burnt police cars, smashing their windows and everything else. You are allowed to condemn that. And in fact, it is a good idea to condemn that, because if you don't, you may not condone it, but people are going to take that as their representative, that you are going to be weak on the subject of law and order, and are fine seeing any type of anarchy in the streets. Or at the very least, don't react as harshly as you should. But there's also another reason why I think she's actually fine with all this. Because Nadia sent this tweet out back in June of last year, where it is a video of the Edward Colston statue being torn down and people celebrating. She tweeted this: "I celebrate these acts of resistance. We need a movement that will tear down systematic racism and the slave owner statues that symbolise it. And we need to win a government that will always be on the side of this movement. Hashtag Black Lives Matter." Well, guess what, Nadia? This is pretty much what you have endorsed. And this isn't the only mental Labour MP who has said something crazy recently. Somewhat related to Antifa and BLM, Zara Sultana, Labour MP, tweeted this: "Racism is a feature of capitalism. It is used to divide our communities here at home and to justify imperialism abroad. On UN Anti-Racism Day, let's recommit to building a world against racism through anti-racism that is internationalist socialism." Guess what Antifa are on? They are international socialists. And of course the whole anti-racism bit, that by the way doesn't mean just be colourblind, it means we need to oppress whitey for the history of the world. That fits into everything that Black Lives Matter wants. And oh, BLM was made by a bunch of Marxists. International socialists. My god, it all fits together. Honestly, I recommend everyone read Andy No's book. It covers all of this in good detail. But to get to my main point, all of this was inevitable. This is what happens when your police force starts kneeling to Black Lives Matter and other anarchists. This is what happens when they simply let them tear down a statue and nothing is done to put the statue back and to make sure that something like that never happens again. This is what happens when you don't arrest these people and charge them properly. You embolden them to do more, and it took less than a year for Bristol to then have its riots, because of a bill that is actually doing less to infringe on civil liberties than the lockdown we currently find ourselves in. So the ideal thing to do would be to put Edward Colston back on his plinth, make sure these things never happen again, and prepare for more riots, because they're emboldened now to do more because of certain MPs not properly condemning it, and the fact that the police are currently struggling to actually identify rioters because of their masks. Though they are looking for people who torched a police car because there were policemen still inside, and that counts as attempted murder. Hopefully they got put away for a long time, but if it's anything like America, these people will be let out of prison with a slap on the wrist. And finally, what is it that Bristol are deciding to do with Colston's plinth that should have Colston kept on the plinth? Colston protesters statue could make a return to the plinth. If anything, all that will do will cement BLM and Antifa's victory, and will embolden them to do more till they have their own Chaz. So after a quick history of the statue, which I went over in a video before so I won't bother doing here, the article says, "It has now emerged that a planning service company, Interpolitan Limited, sought planning permission to install the statue of Miss Reed for a 2-year period. The firm has lodged an appeal because the council failed to make a decision on its planning request," the local democracy reporting service said. Bristol City Council said the application has been made retrospectively late last summer. The mayor said Ms Reed's statue had to be removed as the decision to install it had not yet been part of a democratic process involving people in the city. A government inspector will now consider whether Ms Reed's statue should be restored, although a formal hearing date has yet to be set. The council has previously said the decision about what goes on the plinth, if anything, should be made by the people of Bristol. Well, we'll see how far that goes, and if Bristol end up voting in that Ms Reed statue, then Bristol, as far as I'm concerned, is lost to the communists, and should therefore not be treated as an English city, as England has always been a fairly capitalist nation, and has generally taken a stand against communism. Hence our involvement in the Cold War and many other wars fighting communism. Yet here we are having it infested within one of our great cities in the southwest. Alas, there's not much I can do up north, but I will probably actually urge people to leave Bristol. I don't think it's going to get any better, and you're probably going to end up with a Chaz in your midst with a lot of stabbings going on, if it's anything like America. But that's about everything I had for you today. Let's hope that Bristol doesn't end up with its own Chaz, and if it does, we deal with it a hell of a lot better than they managed to deal with it in Seattle. But That's everything I had for you today, so, as usual, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.